Okay, I'd like to welcome you to PNP Live. My name is Chelsea Lake, and I'm a member of the events team at Politics and Prose Bookstore. Welcome. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. At any point during the event, you can click on the link I'll be dropping in the chat to purchase Move, How the New Science of Body Movement Can Set Your Mind Free. You can ask a question by clicking on the Q&A, which can be found along the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to everyone's questions, but I apologize in advance if we don't have time to address yours. We are delighted to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To access captions, simply click on the live transcripts option that's also along the bottom of your screen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Caroline Williams is a science journalist and editor, a consultant for and regular contributor to New Scientist. She has also written for The Guardian, BBC Future, and BBC Earth, among others. She has worked as a radio producer and reporter for BBC Radio and holds a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences from Exeter University and a Master of Science with distinction in Science Communication from Imperial College, London. She's the author of My Plastic Brain, One Woman's Year-Long Journey to Discover if Science Can Improve Her Mind. Dr. Wendy Suzuki is a professor of neural science and psychology in the Center for Neuroscience of New York University. She was recently named one of the top 10 women changing the way we see the world by Good Housekeeping, and her TED Talk has more than 31 million views on Facebook. She is the author of Good Anxiety and Healthy Brain, Happy Life. Ladies, the screen is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Such a pleasure to be with you, Caroline. This is really about this amazing new book that that's about to come out in the US, Move, and that was a smash hit in the UK in April when it came out. I'd love to start with, also I want to say that January is the perfect month for this book to come out. Really excited for you. And I wanted to start with an evolutionary perspective. You say in the book that our brain evolved us to move. Can you explain that statement for us?
Yeah, so I can't take full credit for the idea of linking evolution of the brain to movements. This is a guy called Rudolfo Linas. He's a Colombian neuroscientist. And he made this point through these weird little creatures called sea squirts. And they sort of represent a snapshot in evolutionary time where evolution was trying to work out whether brains were worth having or not. So brains take a lot of energy. They're very high maintenance bits of kit. And basically, if there's no use for them, you would just recycle that energy and use it for something else. And in the case of the sea squirt, it starts off in a kind of tadpole-like larval stage where it swims around the ocean, and its job is to find a good spot on the ocean floor to attach and live out the rest of its life, filter feeding, and sort of it turns into a blob with sort of two tubes, sucks in air, sex and water in one tube and ejects it from the other. And while it's in this tadpole stage, while it's moving around, it does have a very basic brain. So they link its movements to basically information about what's safe and what's not safe. So Lina said, movement is too dangerous to attempt without a plan. So it kind of allows the creature to sort of put this information together. But once it finds a place to settle, it sort of attaches itself, it glues itself on by the head. And the first thing it does is digests almost its entire nervous system because it's never going to move again. It can't escape danger, so it's kind of all over. So why bother keeping this bit of kit? And so this was kind of a really interesting point of view that we don't have a brain to think or for anything other than to inform our movements in the world towards rewards and away from dangers. And so at the very, very basic level, yeah, that's why we have a brain in the first place.
Yeah, I love that perspective. You don't think about it typically in that way. But the other thing I'd love to ask authors is, what was the origin story that made you want to tackle this topic of movement? What was that aha moment that made you think, this is what my next book is going to be about?
Yeah, well, I mean, it sort of grew out of 20 odd years of writing about the brain. And, my interest has always been, why do we think the way we do? Why, our brains are amazing. How do they work? And also on the other side of that, why are there all these glitches that seem to be part of the deal? Like, anxiety and lack of focus and, all these other things that seem to be part of the deal. And can we maximize the good stuff and minimize the bad stuff? And it sort of became clear sort of when I was researching my previous book, which is all about, changing my brain, that thinking of the brain as if it's not attached to the rest of you is kind of a bit weird, because clearly things you do with your body affect how you feel. And obviously, and I've always been a very active person. And it dawned on me that I never feel more focused than after I've done an hour of yoga. I never have better ideas than when I'm out walking the dog by myself and my mind is wandering. And, I never feel happier than when I'm jumping around in the kitchen ridiculously to some loud music. So I started thinking, I wonder if there's anything that science can tell us about why that is. And then also what we can do with that information. So are there any ways of moving that are better than others for certain things? And so I started digging around, and I was just amazed how much research is out there, everything from sort of cell biology to physiology to, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I just got really stuck into that and never looked back, really.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I love about this book is it is just full of so many interesting facts and research findings, and you kind of just weave all of them into this kind of amazing tapestry. And I'd love to ask, after all of this research, I'm sure there's many, but what was that piece of research that you found that really made you sit back and go, wow, that everybody needs to know this?
I think for me, it was the link between physical strength and mental health, self-esteem. There's really solid evidence going back to the late 80s that if you improve somebody's physical strength, then regardless of whether they're doing cardiovascular exercise or any other kind of exercise, it improves self-esteem, it reduces anxiety. People just feel more capable in their general daily lives. And that was kind of news for me. And I think weights and physical strength gets a little bit sort of left out of the equation when we talk about movement and exercise. But just that simple thing, especially for women and especially for children, who may not be quite so inclined, that becoming physically strong can have such a massive impact in your life. And it's so easy to do at home. So that's one thing I definitely started adding, not just with lifting weights, but also things like I spend a lot more time sitting on the floor than I used to, because then you have to get up, and that strengthens your legs, and leg strength has been correlated with all kinds of great health outcomes. And so just simply thinking about taxing your body a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that too. I like to stay active. I love the idea of sitting on the floor more. I haven't tried that. But the issue that comes up so much in and around this area of physical activity and movement is motivation. There are so many people that would like find that fact very interesting, but find it hard to change their habits in that way. I wonder whether you have any tips or hacks for that big issue in this area of movement.
Well, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because as well as being in our evolutionary history that we need to move and think and move at the same time, and that's the creatures that we are, there's also something in there that we should conserve energy whenever we can, because if you don't know where the next meal's coming from, you don't want to be wasting precious energy. So we have this sort of in our makeup, and the environment doesn't help us, because it's very easy to sit around and you don't have to go to a bookshop for a launch event. You can just kind of go online, and you can you can date online if you want to, and you don't have to move at all. So yeah, motivation is a real tricky one. I mean, I think there's kind of a focus on exercise, going to the gym in all the kind of ways that we think of exercise. And I think we've kind of got that a little bit wrong. So it's more about finding a way to move that works for you, that you enjoy, and whether that's just dancing around at home, whether it's swimming, walking around the block, it doesn't have to be a thing that you go and do.
Right.
So yeah, I guess it's a kind of I like to think of people going out and trying various things, and just seeing what works for them, because it's very easy to go through school, come out the other end and think, oh, well, exercise isn't for me. I didn't like that. That wasn't my thing. But there's so many other ways to move that don't involve hand-eye coordination or squat thrusts and things like that. So I think it's about finding what works for you. And then you don't need to motivate yourself because you want to do it, because it's fun and you feel good afterwards.
Exactly. One of the facts in your book that really, literally yesterday motivated me to go and walk my cousin's dog because I wanted to move a little bit more, was the fact that you write about that on average, we are spending 70% of our entire lives either sitting or laying still. That is horrifying.
I know.
Me. 70%. And then I thought about it. It's like, oh my God, it's right. I need to move right now. How 70% is just way too huge a number.
Huge. It really is huge. Yeah. I mean, and I'm as guilty of that as anyone. You know, I spent a lot of the year of writing the book sitting here going, I am a fraud. I'm writing about how people are moving, but I'm just sitting. But yeah, it's kind of breaking it up and also giving yourself permission to that kind of counts as work, because if you're more creative, you know, there's studies linking, you know, mind wandering while walking to improved creativity, which kind of spills over for, you know, a couple of hours afterwards.
Yeah.
So kind of just getting into your own head. And I had to do this for myself, and I don't have a boss. So that counts as work, that what you're doing is important, and it can be done on the move. So because it's so tempting in our daily lives. We do think that being productive and doing what we're supposed to do should involve sitting at a desk and sort of tapping away. Right. And that's not necessarily the case. But yeah, you're right. It's completely horrifying. And it's a challenge.
It's just, well, that could be motivation for people. 70%, you know, think about how much of your time you're sitting, working, watching TV, of course, sleeping. Don't want to compromise that. I know we're going to get to sleep in a little bit, but that is just such a huge number. I was going to say, so the research into sort of brain imaging studies that follow people for a long period of time have linked sort of declines in thickness of brain regions involved in memory not to the amount of exercise you do, but to the amount of time you spend sedentary. Yeah. So it's kind of, even if you go out and, you know, run up a hill at lunchtime, it's better than not doing it, obviously, but it still doesn't take away the effects of all that sitting. So I think kind of a little and often approach to activity is probably quite a healthy way to think about it. Fidgeting, I'm a big fidget, so okay. So fidgeting counts. I mean, and walking counts too. People often, you know, feel like, well, I'm never going to be a marathoner, so you know, I'm doomed. But a huge message through the book is dancing in your kitchen, going for a walk with your dog. You just said fidgeting. Anything. Movement is so much broader and not such a negative connotation as the word exercise.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that puts a lot of people off. And actually, for the people who do the least exercise, the benefits are bigger at the bottom end. So the less you do, the less you have to do to get the benefits.
Yes. Yes.
And people who are doing loads, then great. They probably know this stuff already. You know, lots of people I know who are very into exercise. When I start telling them this stuff, I'm like, well, yeah, obviously. But not everyone knows that. You know? I think more people should know that.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. You know, one thing that I was curious about is that, you know, the book came out in the UK in April, and really great success. Is there differences in the attitudes towards movement in the UK versus the US? Were there surprises in how the UK population responded to particular elements of the book?
I don't think so. I think we're probably quite similar. I think in the US, there's probably more, you know, the sort of towns are sort of more built around the car than they are in the UK. That's kind of, you know, it's kind of harder to walk sometimes in the US and, you know, get out and exercise because everything's built around the car. But I think we're probably much the same in terms of motivation. People seem to love the bit in the the chapter about walking and running, that when we're moving forward through space, it does something to our perception of time. So these are some kind of cool psychology studies where we tend to perceive the past as being behind us and the future as being in front of us. And when you're physically moving through space, it kind of gives the illusion that you're moving away from the past and into the future. And that's, brings this sense of hope and that you're getting somewhere. And I spoke to an ultramarathon runner who said this completely not knowing about the research. He said, he'd suffered with depression and addiction issues his whole adult life. And he said, when you're going from A to B, it gives you the sense that you can get from A to B. And I think that's something that it sort of makes sense. And especially since we've been living through this pandemic, and at least in the UK, there was a rule at one point where you could only go out once a day and only outside exercise was allowed. And it was a really cool before and after demonstration, even for me, when I sort of go out for walks all the time, but that you can feel hopeless and hemmed in and isn't it awful and the world's falling down around your ears, go out for a walk or a bike ride and suddenly everything feels manageable and sort of hopeful again. And yeah, people seem to really cotton onto that. The interesting thing that people haven't cottoned onto, which I'm interested to see whether the US audience is different, is there's a whole chapter in the book on rest, which I know you said you're going to get to, but nobody ever says to me, oh, how should we rest? But that's the opposite side of the coin to movement, because if we're spending 70% of our time sedentary, there's been some research done on how rested people feel, and nearly everyone feels like they're not getting enough rest. So whatever we're doing with all this lying around, we're not resting properly. So that's the other side of the coin. So it'll be interesting to see what people think of that.
I totally agree. And actually, one of my favorite books is called Rest. And one of the great facts from that book is he describes all the great thinkers in our times that were well known for taking regular naps. And or regular walks during the day. So Watson and Crick, the discoverers of DNA, regular walkers. Winston Churchill, famous for taking naps in the middle of the day during all the time he was leading the UK. And it goes Dickens and
Darwin as
Darwin.
Well. Yeah, so I went to Darwin's house and I walked he had a house in Kent. So he moved out of London because he was finding it a bit, I quite like it because at the time he moved out of London, he was trying to kind of get his thoughts down on paper about, evolution and what it meant, all this stuff he'd picked up on his travels. He couldn't get the headspace to do it. He had young children at home, which, I can just kind of relate to them just knocking on the study door all the time. He couldn't think straight. So he moved out to the countryside of Kent, and he built this path, like a quarter of a mile path that went along a meadow, really lovely meadow. You can walk it now. Anyone happens to be in the UK, in Kent, you can walk along the meadow and then back through the woods. And he would go around, he would walk like 4 or 5 times a day. He would go round and round this, and I just love to think of him stroking his beard and thinking big thoughts. And this is where he managed to kind of get the headspace to put all this stuff together. And so walking and thinking has been known for a really long time, and we somehow have forgotten that.
Exactly. Well, I'm excited. There is a question coming in, and we absolutely encourage everybody online right now. Please put your questions in the Q&A. And so the question is this, Caroline: do you think employers can do more to offer different options for quote unquote productivity in offices, building schedules that involve half sedentary and half active tasks? Or should they revise how offices are built to allow for more ways of working that incorporate activity? What do you think?
I think that would be great. Walking meetings would be amazing. Practically, it may not be for all things, but for anything that you can walk and talk and mull things over and doesn't involve too much note taking or PowerPoint presentations. Walking and talking is a great way to kind of get to the bottom of things. So there's that. I have seen all these sort of treadmill desks and the cycling desks. I don't know. There's something about that makes me a little bit. I don't know. I'm not sure.
There's motion sickness involved in that. I can tell you from direct experience. So there are issues with that.
I would rather that breaks were encouraged so that you could get away from your desk and go and walk around the block, or run up down the stairs, do whatever you like, or you could have a little room where you could go and do some stretches or something like that, rather than having work feel literally like a treadmill where you're sitting on your desk. And although saying that, my mother is 73 and she has movement issues. She has a balance problem, and she has some little pedals that she sits by her TV watching chair, and she pedals along. And so things like that, for people who are less able to get up and move around, then just getting that movement in can be really good.
Yeah.
So
and
it would be nice if employers did recognize that not being at your desk doesn't necessarily mean you're skiving off and, going off and doing something you shouldn't be.
Right. And I feel like it's not all on employers. If you could have your meeting walking, propose that to your colleague. Let's stand up, take a walk while we talk about this, because we don't have to look at a PowerPoint presentation or refer to our notes.
Yeah, I've seen quite a lot of it sort of, now people are working at home quite a lot, I've seen people walking when I've been walking my dog around the woods. There's quite a lot of people with their earphones in having important business meetings on the walk. I mean, that's great that's been happening. It's one positive that's come out of it is that we don't have to be chained to our desks, and nobody seems to mind as much anymore. Like I think a couple of years ago, you were caught out walking the dog when you were supposed to be on a meeting, you'd feel like you'd been caught doing something you shouldn't, but actually now that's kind of part of life. So I think that's a definite positive.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we have more questions coming in. The next question is, somebody wants you to talk more about the link between activity and school success in children, especially children with attention issues.
Yes. Well, there's some really good stuff going on in this regard. So I think the US education system has been criticized quite a bit for cutting out PE time and break times. There's not so much running around as there used to be. Whereas in Finland, for example, they have a break every 45 minutes where kids are expected and encouraged to be physically active. And so they don't actually end up sitting for very long. And they have some of the best scores education wise in the world, and so there's also a UK initiative called the Daily Mile, and it was started by a Scottish headmistress who noticed, she started it I think for physical fitness reasons. She noticed that there was a lot of sedentary behavior, there was obesity, these kids weren't healthy, and so she put this thing into the day where the class teacher could just decide, okay, Daily Mile, and every day they wouldn't change their shoes, they'd just drop their pencils and just go and run around outside in the playground for 15 minutes. And they used to average about a mile. And so researchers have gone in after that and done research on their ability to focus, their ability to a lot of behavior, their grades, and they've all improved. And so this has been taken up by loads of schools now around the UK. I gave a talk in the summer and there was a girl in the audience going, me, and she said she did it and she absolutely loved it. Best part of the day. So it just goes to show, it's kind of depressing in a way, because you think, why would children need to be told to go and run around outside? But if their break times are being taken away and their PE time is being taken away, just having that release is really helpful, and especially for kids with attention issues, because sometimes, especially the younger ones, they can't stay still and just burn off some energy. I'm a bit like that myself, so I totally get it.
I got to give a talk with the founder of the Daily Mile. And so I heard her story. She was absolutely brilliant. And it was because she noticed that all of her kids in the school they didn't look healthy. They were looking lethargic. And so it was just this brilliant idea that she's now taken to, I believe it reached the level of the Scottish Parliament, that this is now being considered a countrywide effort. And my favorite little tidbit that I learned from her is that she wanted to go younger, not just, elementary and middle school kids, but, even earlier. And she wanted to call it the Daily Toddle.
Oh, sweet.
Adorable.
Oh, that's adorable. And it's almost like we should all do that in our working day as well. Just,
exactly.
You need a colleague to say, you look fidgety, go.
Yes.
Go run away.
Exactly.
And then come back. But yeah, the kids love it, the teachers love it, and especially if you're in sort of younger age groups where there's one class, one teacher.
Yes.
The teacher can then time it for the time in the day when people are starting to look fidgety and wasting her time anyway. So they might as well go and run around and get some of the, cobwebs
Well,
blown away.
that was one of the elements that I learned from this talk was so helpful. It wasn't, at 12:15, your class must go. It's like sometime during the day, whatever works for you, you go, and everybody, the teacher has to do it too. Everybody, you're in a wheelchair, go out. You have crutches, go out and move for this 15 minutes. I don't care how fast or slow. And it just became this thing. They all look forward to it, and they all got faster over the year. So it was great. I just love that idea.
Yeah, me too. More of that.
Okay, yes, more of that. So here's another question. You say you're not a fan. I think maybe this is for me. You say you're not a fan of the treadmill desk, and I say that just because there are costs involved, and there is motion sickness. Is that because you're worried people will use that as their exercise in lieu of walking or bike ride? No, it's for cost reasons. I'm not sure if I want to put on employers, okay, you go buy, because they're not cheap. Treadmill desks for all of your workers as a requirement. I think we're talking about lots of other options that are more cost effective and may in the end be more usable. Go out for a walk when you need it, not that you have to have this. It's a big thing too,
whether you like it or not.
Yes.
Yeah. And also there's benefits of walking outside the benefits of being on a treadmill are slightly different to being, walking on an uneven pathway. That kind of taxes all your balance, and you get feedback from your feet, and there's bird song, and you get other things that you wouldn't get just walking on a flat kind of that's not really what is gonna improve your life. And I can't imagine it would make me more productive. I think I just feel like a hamster on a wheel.
I mean, it depends. I feel like you can make it more. I would immediately, put my Audible in, listen to a podcast or listen to a book, and use it that way, as I would during my commute, as I do during my commute. So, different people will use it different ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
So here's another question that has come in. Thank you for all the questions. I think both of us love the interaction with the audience. Do either of you have favorite public spaces that encourage activity or movements, or else school campuses, office, apartment buildings, designs, etc., that you come across? What's your favorite public space for movement, Caroline?
I'm kind of old school. I like the woods. I'm kind of probably slightly embarrassing to my sort of nearly teenage son when we go out to the woods, because I like to find fallen logs to kind of walk along and balance on, and swing about, and bumps to jump my bike over and things like that. So I think you can find stuff, you can find ways to make anywhere active, but there's quite a lot of parks. There's one down the road from me here where they have monkey bars and, all kinds of things that you can just mid-run, just, hop over some stuff.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that places are designed to allow it to happen, but you can also just, if you don't mind looking ridiculous, there's a lot you can do with just whatever's on your doorstep.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll give a plug for the apartment dwellers out there. I live in Manhattan, and so the stairwell is very powerful place of movement. So especially if there are, in Manhattan, there's a lot of people outdoors, so you may or may not want to be out on the sidewalk depending on that time of day. So the stairwell is always there. It's free. You can still pop your ear pods in and help yourself out with some music. So I think without adding any more cost, I think there are lots of ways you can do, and in buildings as well. If you make a rule, you have to go up at least one flight of stairs every time you take the elevator. That's going to be an automatic increase in your number of steps and your amount of cardio every day. Absolutely.
And there's also a group of people I met sort of doing the research for the book, and called MoveNat, and it's sort of natural movements, moving as a human should. And so there's all kinds, they sort of make woods a playground or whatever. But there's also, they have these things they call movement snacks, where you can just take a break whenever you're sitting and, for example, just hang from your door for like 30 seconds or crawl about for a bit. I had my almost teenager who's taller than me on my back the other day and doing the old thing of pretending to be a donkey. And I'm thinking, well, this is kind of good for my abs. This is exhausting, but you know, you can, there's lots you can do with nothing, essentially.
Exactly. So before we get back to this last question that just came in, this conversation gets us to this concept that I love in your book called movement nutrition. Basically, we've been talking about movement nutrition, but can you give us that little hook so that everybody will want to read more about movement nutrition in your book?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I can't take credit for the idea of movement nutrition. This is Katie Bowman, who I think if people are interested in movement, they will have come across her book. So she sort of goes about movement from a more physical, you know, mobility point of view, but we're sort of very much on the same page. So what she says is that exercise is part of movement, but in a way, doing exercise is a bit like taking supplements instead of eating healthy food. So eventually your body's going to cry out for the real stuff. And so it's better than not doing it. But, you know, nutritious movement is more about doing what your body wants, you know, keeping yourself into a healthy range of motion, keeping everything flowing through. So there's a chapter in the book about stretching and what it does to the fascia and sort of keeps the fluids moving through the lymphatic system. And, you know, all this stuff that I used to roll my eyes out at yoga classes, you know, like twist the toxins out of your tissues. I think, oh, please. But actually, there's research that suggests that that's sort of what's happening and it keeps things moving along. So, you know, to keep your body fit, healthy, and doing all the things it's supposed to do requires movement. And so that's what it's about. It's not about just, you know, thinking I'm going to get big biceps or improving your personal best running time or, you know, it's about doing something for yourself, something healthy for yourself, the whole of you, rather than just,
And I feel like, what are your thoughts about this? I've become much more self-aware and mindful of how I am truly feeling in my body, not just checking something off on an app that, you know, keeps track of how many steps, but how do I feel today? Does my body need that stretch? Or is it craving, like it did earlier this morning for me, more cardio work? And you know, and I say that because earlier it was like, okay, what class can I go to the gym today? Okay, I'll go to that one because that's the one that's being offered right now, rather than saying, what does my body really need? So,
Definitely. I think that kind of changes depending on how you're feeling or what's going on. It also varies from person to person. So, you know, I'm quite a sort of high octane person. My mind's constantly going and I can't stand still. So the kinds of movements I choose that help me feel calmer and focused and, you know, better about everything are things like yoga and walking and paddleboarding and, you know, things that are quite gentle and they force you to slow down and breathe and to be a bit more present. Whereas for other people, they need the kind of, oh, I'm going to go and cycle up a hill at max speed and, you know, or go and do an ultra marathon. People need different things. So but you're right. But just thinking, I was actually thinking that to myself earlier. What do I need to do? Do I need to go? Do I need to dance around? Do I need? And I actually settled on clearing up the post-holiday Armageddon of my house and just high intensity hoovering instead. Just, you know,
which is good exercise in the pandemic. You know, in the isolation, in you know, during the pandemic, that was one of the things that I added back in because I didn't have my commute to work anymore. And so it turns out that mopping and dusting and cleaning, especially the bathroom, I find bathroom cleaning very aerobic.
Okay. Absolutely. So that definitely sorted me out today. And then, you know, last night I was out with friends and they had teenage daughters who were teaching us the latest TikTok dances. And, you know, there's a whole, I mean, I could have gone on a lot more pages on dance because it's just incredible what dance does to your brain and your feeling of connection to other people. And I really felt that last night. We were all in the room together. These teenagers were teaching us the dances and laughing at us because we were terrible at them. And, you know, you feel that connection through dancing. So sometimes you want to feel closer to people. Sometimes you want to be on your own, mind wandering and being creative. So it's sort of horses for courses.
That's great. I want to come back to dance, but there's a few more questions that have come in. So the next one from Lisa is, what are your thoughts on how we can take this amazing research on movement to change culture, to break into systems? Oops. Where did it go? Sorry, I lost the question.
Oh, I'll finish it off. I got it here. Like antiquated school systems that aren't reflecting the new science. Where do both you see entry points for changing the movement conversation? Yes, Lisa, exactly. I feel the same. And I think things are starting to change with things like the Daily Mile. And also I think there are 3 groups where the biggest bang for the buck can be had, and so I call this my movement manifesto. So the first is young, start children young, because the next generation, life is even more sedentary for them than it was for my generation. So trying to do something in schools and community centers, give kids the option to try things out that aren't necessarily ball related sports, get them to try all kinds of things, circus skills, parkour, anything. And then they hopefully will get the idea that it makes them feel good and they'll seek it out for themselves. That's what, that's what we really want, for people to want to do it. And also, in teaching, I saw a great video of a maths teacher teaching angles by sort of jumping around, like, okay, 90, and they'd all jump. And then they go, 180, and they'd all jump 180 degrees. And it was fabulous. And those kids will remember their angles forever. So I think there's ways and means of doing it. And also, the other places I think are really important are in mental health treatments, because there's a lot of, we know really well now that exercise is really important for mental health. And it's almost like we pay lip service to it, but how many doctors are prescribing exercise and prescribing group walks? It's starting to happen. There's quite a movement in the UK. It's starting to happen. But it's sort of like an add-on. It needs to be at this, front and center of sort of mental health treatments. And then the elderly. The elderly are sort of sedentary like 80% of the time, often for good reasons. But there's a lot you can do from a chair. So one great guy I met, Terry Kvasnik, who's like a stuntman, acrobat. He now teaches children sort of resilience through the medium of backflips and all these cool tricks. He has done stuff with older people, and he's had them doing break dancing in their chairs, and absolutely loving it. And he says it doesn't matter if they're not obviously spinning on their heads, but he'll be doing stuff and they'll be doing what they can, their version of what he's doing, and the benefits are huge. So there's a lot of potential to improve people's lives at all different stages, and in the adult stage, I don't know, it's not up to me to tell people what to do, but middle age is the time that it has to happen at the very least, because that's when decline starts happening, and what you put in the bank now will last you a lifetime. So
that's beautiful. Before we get back to some of the questions, I wanted to have you talk a little bit more about dance, because one of my favorite articles in the New York Times about movement recently was the headline, "Dance is the new kale of exercise."
Oh, wow.
And so
it's more fun than kale, surely.
But you go well beyond kale in your book, in terms of the amazing effects of dance, in terms of decision making and emotional literacy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, like you could write, other people have written whole books on dance, but there are so many aspects of what dance does for our minds. And the one that I just keep coming back to because it seems so powerful is that there's one idea that when we move our bodies, especially rhythmically, when we're dancing and moving in time with other people, that does something quite profound to how we feel about other people. So we have this sense of proprioception that we know without looking where our body is in space. And as we're moving, we know where we're at. And if we're moving in synchrony with another person, their movements, which are coming in through our senses, kind of gets a bit tangled up with our own movements and what we can feel and what we can see about ourselves, to the point where it starts, the sort of me and you, the self and other line starts to get blurred. And so we start to feel closer together, more bonded together. And that's one of the ideas about why dance evolved in the first place. Why humans dance is one of the biggest questions. Like, why don't dogs dance? Why do humans dance? There's something fundamental. And one idea is that it's a social bonding thing. When we move together, we care more about each other. And there's these lovely experiments with little children. And if you bounce them on your knee in time to music, and then you sort of drop something, you pretend not to notice, they're far more likely to help you pick it up and pass it back if they've been bounced in time with music than if you just sort of bounce them all over the place. But there's something about synchronous movement that makes us care more about people from a very early age. I've done sort of like the equivalent in adults with gambling games and stuff like that. So there's something very fundamental about moving in time with music. But then there's the whole other aspect of dance, which is emotional expression. And there's a whole issue in modern life, particularly with people not being able to put names onto their emotions, their body sensations, and not being able to name them. And then it's very difficult to regulate your emotions if you don't know what they are and what they mean. Am I excited or am I angry? If you don't have that sort of granularity, it's very difficult to control your mental experience. And so dance can be one way to help people tune into their bodies better and learn to express themselves through dance, which I know makes me want to stick forks into my eyes. But there's some really interesting research that it's really beneficial for people. And I went to a lovely dance group with a bunch of young people who really spoke beautifully about what it had done for them to be able to have a safe space where they could explore their emotions and their mental health issues through dance, and that it sort of spilled over into other aspects of their life. So yeah, I could go on about dance for ages. You might want to stop me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love dance too, and thinking about how I can bring different kinds of movements, including dance, to the students that I serve at New York University. So that's definitely high on my list.
Yeah, sorry, I just remembered a really cool thing about that. Is that there's something to do with our the rhythm of so all humans seem to sort of resonate our pendulum legs at a similar frequency, regardless of how tall or short we are. And it seems to come out about 120 steps per minute, which is sort of the sort of average beat in most Western pop music. And so there's something about the way we dance is sort of very much sort of in tune with our bodies, and it just comes naturally to us, and we should do it more. I was going to say something more profound, but I've forgotten completely what I was going to say. I should dance more today, clearly.
Absolutely. That is profound. Dance more. I think that's a profound message. So just to give everybody a heads up, we're going to move to just questions. So if you have your questions that you've been hanging on to, please put them in the question and answer, and we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. But at the end, I'm going to turn back to Caroline and ask whether she has any final thoughts for us. So let's go back to the questions. And the next one on the list, Caroline, is, does stress and doing activities to move have lesser outcomes than someone who has less or no stress, but also does activities to move? So what is the effect of stress on the effectiveness of exercise, I think, to summarize that question?
Yeah, I'm trying to unpack. I got the picture in front of me. I'm going to have a little. To stress and doing activities to move have lesser outcomes. So is movement more or less important if you're stressed? I guess is the question.
I think so.
So exercise is a really good way of getting rid of stress, apart from anything else. We have all this kind of stress hormones built up, and then we, you almost kind of have a blowout and get rid of it. But there is definitely an argument that when you're stressed, you're very aroused, heart is beating and hormones are racing around your body. Maybe in some cases, what the last thing you need is more stress hormones going around. So it's back to what you were saying, Wendy, about being, a bit attuned to what your body needs. Sometimes you might need to go and lie down in a darkened room and breathe deeply. So there's a chapter on breathing, which might not sound like movement, but it's a voluntary movement that humans can make, and other species can't control their breath like we can, and it has a direct line to the brain and affects how we think and feel. So breathing at 6 breaths per minute is some kind of sweet spot where it gets more oxygen into your body, but it also stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the kind of a calm down parasympathetic nervous system, which just takes that stress response right down. And so sometimes I do I'm also a big advocate of naps. And so sometimes I find myself getting agitated and stressed. And I do think, what do I need to do? Do I need to go and walk around the woods and have a stomp? Or do I just need to lie in a darkened room and breathe deeply for a bit? Mm-hmm. And so either of those things can work. And I think it's sort of trial and error to see what is needed in any given situation. But but exercise and physical activity is a form of stress, but it's a good form of stress. Yes, you do want to stress your body. A little bit of what harmed you is good for you. So that's part of what happens when you exercise. You're stressing your body, and then your body learns to regulate that. So
yeah, great. So Leah asked the question that I wanted to ask you, actually. Could you talk a little bit more about the science and the relationship about the brain, between the brain and anxiety and movement?
Well, you should answer this one, Wendy. You've written the whole book. Yeah, so anxiety is a really interesting one. I mean, I was, as I said, really surprised about the weights link to anxiety. So what it seems to come back to, so it sort of goes into a sort of slightly fuzzier area of sort of science / philosophy of how we build our sense of self. And this is of Antonio Damasio's work. It sort of underlies embodied cognition. And so the idea is that when we are in the world and we're trying to navigate our way through life with as little trouble as possible, we have this implicit sense of what's going on in our bodies. And so, there's constant messaging coming from the muscles, the bones, just keeping the brain updated sort of, and we don't even know it's happening, about how things are going. And so one of the explanations for this exercise, and particularly weights and strength and reducing anxiety, is that when you're physically strong and agile and you have this sense that you can handle yourself physically, that this sort of feeds into an implicit sense that you can handle yourself in all other ways as well. So it's almost like sort of standing down the anxious response, which is, looking around for, what's going to go wrong next. That can stand down a little bit, because a lot of what goes wrong, you can definitely handle, and your body feels like it can handle that. Yeah. So it kind of, it's a really hard thing to measure, obviously. But then in the studies I was talking about in the 80s with these teenage girls, improved their strength by 40%. They reported feeling more capable in all walks of life. So even things that had nothing to do with physicality, it was, having difficult conversations with people. They just felt more powerful in themselves. And so it may be this implicit sense is just like, don't mess, I'm strong enough. So maybe that's just one way of dialing down the anxiety.
Yeah, I'll just add from my own research. So my last book is called Good Anxiety, and my favorite story, research from that book came from an experiment that I did last September when I had a group of incoming NYU freshmen. This was August 2020, right before this strange, everybody was suddenly online and we didn't know what to do moment. And instead of speaking to them for all 30 minutes, what I did is I had them take a quick anxiety questionnaire just to see where they are. I had them all stand up on Zoom. We all moved our bodies together for literally just 10 minutes. It was kind of an aerobic, fun workout that included affirmations. And then I sent them back to do the anxiety survey again. And what I found was that before the movement session, these freshmen, as all the reports said, were highly anxious. They were just shy of clinically anxious. in August 2020. But after just 10 minutes of moving together on Zoom, this wasn't live, this wasn't outside, this was wherever they happened to be, it decreased their clinical anxiety score by 15 points, putting them in the normal anxiety level, normal anxiety range.
Yeah.
And this is consistent with research that I've done showing that movement, 30 minutes of movement, has profound effects on your anxiety levels. So there is a very, very strong effect. And that is an area that I'm very interested in looking at in my research.
Absolutely. It's kind of almost like you're revved up and your whole body is telling you that something bad is happening. There's something about telling your body you've got away. And there's been some interesting stuff in trauma recovery as well, which is kind of early stage. I think much more research needs to be done. But people who do high intensity exercise after a traumatic event seem to recover better. There's debate over whether learning sort of assertive movement saying no is better than just wearing your body out. Animal studies suggest that if you stress rats out and allow them to fight for a bit afterwards and roll around, they recover faster. So there's something in that we sort of need to give your body something to do to give some closure to the anxiety and the stress response. And so then it's not going to make it go away completely, but maybe if you can dial it down to a healthy level, then you can have the good anxiety and not the bad.
From personal experience, this is not from a study that I or anybody else have done. I recommend kickboxing because it literally, you punch and you just are, in your mind, punching away at whatever that thing that is dealing. I am a regular kickboxer, so.
Absolutely. And I recommend also throwing sticks hard. I have a dog who likes chasing sticks, and there's something about going out, if I'm really upset and cross about something, I'll just go and lob sticks down a hill. He's happy, and you can kind of aim at a tree as a target and imagine it's somebody. There's places you can go where you can actually throw axes at targets for fun. I kind of think that might be throwing sticks on steroids. That might be really fun.
You have to be careful. You could hurt yourself, but
I know.
Okay, Susan asks, there's more. Susan asks, how does exercise, I'm having lighting issues. How does exercise impact aging process and cognitive processing?
Oh, very well. So I mean, obviously we're all going to decline cognitively at some point, but there was actually a fairly stark, or several stark statistics. The one that sticks in my mind is that something like 13% of Alzheimer's cases can be traced to a sedentary lifestyle, which is a huge amount. And it just suggests that, we just need to keep those memory banks going. I mean, like, for all the reasons that, for evolutionary reasons, when we were on the savannah hunting and gathering, the being able to be an endurance athlete was important, but also being able to think and remember and work as a team and find your way home was also important. And so at that point, this is a guy called David Reichland who's done this research, that at that point in our evolution, being physically active and brain health became tied together. And so when we tax our bodies, our brains invest, make new connections, more blood flow, new brain cells, better set up for learning and memory. And when we don't, the brain, because they're very expensive bits of kit, make savings and take what's not necessary. And so if we don't, we're basically stuck with this system whereby we have to move for our cognitive functions to be the best they can possibly be. It's not that, go ultra running and you'll be some kind of superhuman amazing, but you've got your genetic limit. And to stay the best you can be, movement is non-negotiable. Unfortunately, it's take it up with Homo erectus, because they started it when they started hunting and gathering. The other species don't have the same problem. There's a species of goose that gets trained for 3,000 kilometer migrations by basically sitting around and eating, and their hearts get bigger and they get stronger and everything works beautifully. But unfortunately, our bodies don't work like that, and neither do our brains. So for a healthy old age, it's really important from middle age onwards, definitely be more active.
Great. And I want to go back to a question about movement and dance again. And the question is, what about wheelchair-bound people? Can dance using their arms produce the same benefits?
Absolutely. I mean, whatever you got available to you, like seated exercise, seated dance, you can still connect with people. You can still get the beat. You still get the satisfaction of hitting the beat, which is, gives you a little dopamine boost and you feel good about yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't need to have a fully functioning, get up and jump around, and you don't need to be. And one of the lovely choreographers I spoke to for the books just said, people think that to be able to dance, you have to be able to flip on your head and do all these cool things. You don't. Everyone can dance. And there's this lovely Zimbabwean proverb, which is like, if you can walk, you can dance. Mm-hmm. Actually, if you can't walk, you can still dance. But if you can move anything, you can dance. So yeah, whatever you can do that, I would say.
I often get asked, there's injuries and my right shoulder is injured and therefore I can't move at all. Wait, don't you have other limbs that
Yeah.
And going back to, was it your mother who uses the pedal?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's so many things that you can,
Yeah, and I took her shopping for she wanted some weights, and I actually insisted that she got, because before she became disabled, she was actually a personal trainer for a while. So she knows all about exercise. And when I was telling her about I was doing this book, she said, well, that's great, but I can't really, can I? You're going to tell me my brain's going to fall apart and it seems like, but no, so she does what she can. So I insisted that she had wrist weights rather than ones that she could then drop on her head. Yeah. And she put me to shame. I was saying, well, I've got these 2.5 kilos. Just like, seriously, 5 kilos, and she's getting stuck in. And there's lots of things you can do. And people who are, so she walks with a walker, and one of the things you can do if you're less mobile is lifting up heels and strengthening calves and things, and that can keep balance going for longer. And there's a lot you can do. It doesn't have to be being some, I follow a lot of people on Instagram that make me feel very, very bad about my physical ability, but it doesn't have to be backflips to headstand, everything else.
Absolutely. So I wanted to make sure and leave a few minutes for you, Caroline, to give us any parting messages. We've talked about so many different topics today. Anything that we missed, and what do you want to leave this wonderful Politics and Prose audience with?
I guess what I would like people to kind of get that, to understand is that it's really important and game changing at this time. There's never been a more important time to kind of put movement at front and center of our lives, for mental health reasons, for cognitive health reasons, for feeling better, being happy, having, living our best lives. And it doesn't have to be about how you look. It doesn't have to be about weight. I write a lot of stuff about physical activity, and they always put a headline in the press about this is how you lose weight. It's not about that. Just doing it for how it makes you feel, and then however you look at the end of it, at least you'll have had a good time and it will improve your life. So I don't want to sound preachy, but
well, that's important. It improves your life, but it also has a direct effect on your literal longevity. So
it'll make your life longer and better, feel fun. And it doesn't have to be done in a particular way, and it doesn't have to be, you don't even have to change into different shoes if you don't want to. Active wear is not necessary, but it is comfortable. So.
That's right. What more could you want? You don't have to go buy more clothes. It'll make you healthier, happier, more resilient.
Absolutely. Help you regulate stress. We have these hotlines built into our bodies and our minds, body, brain, mind connections, and you can use your body as a tool to get the best out of life. As a hotline to your mind. So so not to think that thoughts are the only way to feeling less anxious or less stressed. Thoughts are not the only way to emotions. We're not just a brain with a meat suit. We're a whole animal, and need movement as much as ever, more than ever, probably.
That is a great image to end on. We're not just a brain with a meat suit. So Chelsea, Can I hand it back to you? Oh,
Oh, are you there, Chelsea?
Can you hear me?
yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Well, if you can hear me, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. As a reminder, the book link is in the chat. It will take you directly to the Politics and Prose website. While you're there, I hope you'll check out, after you purchase Move, I hope you'll check out our events page. We'd love to see you at another event soon. In the meantime, stay well, stay active, and well read. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea.